Have you ever heard of Russia's Element Zero? Part 1. It was a heavily snowing October morning outside my small apartment in Novosibirsk. I still clearly remember the chilling sensation of touching my phone. A call at 4:00 a.m. never brings good news, especially when you work for people like I do. Michael Petrov, I mumbled into the phone, my voice still heavy with sleep. Code 17B confirm. A rigid voice echoed from the other end. Confirm 17B, I automatically replied. It was one of the security protocols we had to follow. Time, a car will pick you up in 30 minutes. Prepare for a long-term assignment. I wasn't surprised. 3 years working at the Institute for Special Physics Research had prepared me for this moment. We were recruited for scientific research, but we all knew it was just a cover. I am a linguist specializing in ancient ciphers, and my job, at least the spoken part of it, involved deciphering ancient texts of interest to the Russian government. I packed my belongings into a small suitcase, mostly books and a few changes of clothes. The military tends to provide everything you need, and they don't encourage bringing many personal items. The last thing I did was lock my computer and hide it in a drawer. No one would find it there. And if I didn't return, it wouldn't matter anyway. The car arrived on time, a black, unmarked SUV. 2 men in black stood outside, saying nothing as I got in. We drove in silence through the still sleepy city, finally arriving at a military airfield I never knew existed. A small military transport plane waited, engines already running. Dr. Petrov, a tall man in military uniform, approached me as I exited the car. I am Colonel Baranov. I will be commanding your operation at Exmonii. Exmonii? I've never heard of it, I said, trying to remain calm despite my racing heart. Precisely, he chuckled. That's the point. Exmonii doesn't exist on paper, it doesn't exist in conversation, and when we're done, it won't exist in your memory. His words sent a chill down my spine, but I knew how to play this game. I nodded and followed him onto the plane. Inside, there were 4 other people, 2 men and 2 women. All were in civilian clothes and seemed as restless as I was. We exchanged brief nods, but no one spoke. We had been trained not to ask unnecessary questions. The flight lasted 4 hours, but there were no windows, so I couldn't tell which direction we were flying. As we landed, I felt a bone-chilling cold as soon as the plane's door opened. Snow swirled everywhere, and before me lay a frozen wasteland stretching to the horizon. Welcome to Novaya Zemlya, Colonel Baranov said, one of Russia's most secret places. Novaya Zemlya, a remote archipelago in the Arctic Ocean, was known as a nuclear testing site during the Cold War, but few knew it was still in use today. We climbed into a line of waiting snowmobiles and began our journey across the icy plains. After about an hour of travel, we arrived at a small complex that looked like a typical weather research station. Nothing special, no fences, no armed guards, and that was precisely what made it suspicious. Inside the station, we were led to an elevator hidden behind a false wall. The colonel placed his palm on a scanner and entered a long series of numbers into a keypad. The elevator opened, and we stepped inside. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said as the doors closed, "what you are about to see is Russia's most important national secret. You have been chosen for your unique skills. From this moment on, your old world ceases to exist." The elevator began to descend and kept descending. The floor indicator didn't show numbers, only a series of symbols I didn't recognize. I estimated we descended for at least 10 minutes, possibly more than a kilometer below the surface. When the elevator finally stopped and the doors opened, I couldn't believe my eyes. Before us was a vast corridor lit by fluorescent lights, stretching in both directions so far that its end was invisible. The concrete walls were coated in a glossy white paint, incredibly clean. Along the corridor were steel doors, each marked with different symbols. "Welcome to X2, the colonel said, pride evident in his voice. Built in the 1950s as part of Project Key, an effort to collect and store all human knowledge. This is where we keep the world's most dangerous secrets." One of the women in our group, a red-haired woman with thick glasses, asked, "What knowledge would bring us here?" The colonel smiled, a strange smile that made me uneasy. Do you believe in UFOs, Dr. Petrov? He suddenly asked me. No, sir, I replied, feeling confused. And what will you believe after 2 weeks here? He continued, not waiting for an answer. You will be briefed on your specific assignments tomorrow. For today, rest and familiarize yourselves with the living quarters. My staff will escort you to your rooms. As the colonel left, I couldn't help but notice his slight limp, as if one of his legs wasn't entirely human. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. This was just the first day. That night in the small room assigned to me, I couldn't sleep. There was a faint, steady noise like a heartbeat coming from the wall, and when I pressed my ear against the cold concrete, I could have sworn it sounded like a whispered, pomagite knee. Help me asterisk in Russian. I pulled my ear back, my heart pounding. It was just my imagination. It had to be. But as I finally drifted into sleep, I dreamt of endless corridors and a black liquid flowing through cracks in the floor, coiling like fingers searching for something or someone. I jolted awake to the sound of an alarm blaring through the small room. The clock beside the bed showed 5:00 a.m. There were no windows down here, no way to tell if it was day or night outside. I felt as if I had been buried alive. I still remembered the dream of the black liquid and the whispers from last night. I told myself it was just the pressure and the strange environment. But deep down, I felt something was terribly wrong with this place. When I opened my door, a young man in a gray uniform was waiting. Dr. Petrov, I am Nikolai, he said, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I will be your guide for the first few days. Please put on this uniform and meet me outside in 5 minutes. The uniform was a white lab coat with a strange symbol on the breast pocket, a black triangle with a circle in the center. I had never seen this symbol in any Russian scientific organization. Nikolai led me along a long corridor to a large room that resembled a cafeteria. The others were already there, about 30 people, all wearing the same white lab coats. We lined up for breakfast, a gray porridge, a boiled egg, and a cup of black tea. I sat next to the red-haired woman from the day before. I'm Michael, I introduced myself. Irina Sokolova, she replied, her voice soft. I'm a quantum cryptography researcher at Moscow University. Ancient cipher linguist, I said, getting straight to the point. Do you know why we're here? She looked around cautiously before whispering. I hear this is where they keep all the things that shouldn't exist. What do you mean? Knowledge too dangerous to share, forbidden experiments, discoveries beyond ethical limits. She paused, then added, and things not of this earth. Before I could ask more, Colonel Baranov entered the room, and everyone immediately fell silent. Scientists, he said loudly, today you begin your real work. Each of you has been chosen for your special skills. You will be escorted to your individual work areas and briefed on your specific assignments. Remember, everything you see and hear here is under the highest level of security. No personal notes, no electronic devices, no contact with the outside world. Nikolai led me away after breakfast, deeper into the labyrinth of corridors. We passed doors with different symbols. Some were Cyrillic letters, others strange symbols I didn't recognize. Finally, we stopped before a door marked 37B. This is your work area, Dr. Petrov, Nikolai said as he scanned his card. The door opened with a hiss, as if the room was hermetically sealed. Inside was a large study with bookshelves reaching the ceiling. They held ancient books and parchment scrolls. In the center of the room was a large table with computers, scanners, and equipment I didn't recognize. 2 other men were already working in the room. They nodded a greeting as I entered. These are Dr. Kuznetsov and Dr. Volkov, Nikolai introduced. They are also experts in ancient languages and ciphers. Kuznetsov, a small man with a white beard, said, "Welcome to hell, Petrov," with a raspy laugh. Volkov, younger and more serious, just nodded. Your task, Nikolai continued, is to decipher and translate a series of ancient texts discovered in a Siberian cave 10 years ago. We believe these texts contain information about a substance known as Element Zero. Element Zero? I asked. I've never heard of it in the periodic table. That's because it doesn't exist on this earth, Kuznetsov scoffed. At least that's what they tell us. Nikolai shot him a warning glance before turning back to me. You will be provided with more information as needed. For now, here is the first text you need to analyze. He handed me a thick folder containing photographs of parchment pages covered with strange symbols. What's in them? I asked. That's your job, isn't it? Nikolai said, then left the room, leaving me with my two new colleagues. Kuznetsov got up and approached me. Listen, boy, he whispered. What they tell us is only half the truth. We've been here 3 months, and it gets stranger every day. Fyodor, Volkov warned from his desk. The cameras. Kuznetsov ignored him. These texts aren't from Siberia, and they weren't written by humans. Just look closely at the lines, too precise, too perfect. No human hand could create something like that. Don't listen to him, Volkov said. He's been here too long. The walls are starting to talk to him. A shiver ran down my spine as I remembered the whispers I thought I'd heard last night. The walls talking, that's just an expression. Volkov quickly replied, but I saw something in his eyes. Fear. I sat down at my assigned desk and began to examine the photographs. The symbols looked like a combination of Egyptian hieroglyphs and something completely alien. Fluid curves and sharp angles intertwined in a pattern that seemed to follow some mysterious logic. I was engrossed in my work when Kuznetsov placed a cup of tea in front of me. Drink up, he said. Helps against the cold. This place is always cold. I sipped the hot tea. So, who wrote these things if not humans? Kuznetsov looked up at the surveillance camera, then wrote something on a small piece of paper and slid it towards me. I looked down and saw a simple word. Navin. Check, I asked, recognizing the language. He nodded. It means visitor. I didn't ask more, but my mind was racing. UFOs, visitors, element 0. Ancient texts not written by humans. It all sounded like a bad science fiction movie. But somehow, in the context of this secret underground base in the Arctic, it no longer seemed absurd. We worked in silence for several hours. I began to recognize some patterns in the symbols as I jotted them down in a provided notebook. The work was fascinating, albeit unsettling, and I barely noticed when the alarm sounded again, signaling lunchtime. As we were preparing to leave the room, I noticed Volkov staring at his computer screen, his face ashen. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing, he mumbled, quickly turning off the screen. But I had caught a glimpse of a picture of what appeared to be a tall, slender bipedal creature standing in a glass chamber. It was definitely not human. In the cafeteria, I found Irina and sat next to her. What are you working on here? I asked quietly. Quantum encryption, she replied. They have a type of quantum computer here I've never seen, more complex than anything we're developing. Too complex, if you ask me. She gave me a meaningful look. And I'm being asked to translate texts supposedly written by aliens, I countered. She didn't seem surprised. They took you to the park area, didn't they? Did they mention element 0? I nodded, feeling as if I was stepping into a truly alien world. Not much is known about it, but I've heard they store samples on the lower levels and that it doesn't follow normal laws of physics. It can change shape, react to thought, bend time. So that's why we need quantum computers and linguists, I murmured, the pieces starting to fit together. But there's something else, she whispered, leaning closer. The dreams, do you have them? My heart quickened, of the black liquid. Her eyes widened. So you've had that dream, then you're connected. Element 0, it's not just a substance, it's something conscious. Suddenly, the alarm blared, startling us. The lights turned red, and a mechanical voice echoed through the loudspeakers. Warning, isolation breach. All personnel return to your work areas immediately. Irina became frantic. It's happened before, probably one of the animals again. Animals? What animals? But she was already up, joining the rushing stream of people leaving the cafeteria. I started to follow when suddenly all the lights went out, leaving us in complete darkness. Screams erupted, and then I heard it. A sound as if something large was moving through the corridor, followed by a series of wet cracks, as if bones were being crushed. When the emergency lights finally flickered on, casting a faint red glow, I saw what had caused the sound. And for the first time in my life, I felt true horror. The element 0, a black liquid like in my dreams, was dripping from a crack in the ceiling. But it wasn't just flowing down, It was moving as if sentient, coiling and stretching like long, thin fingers searching. And in the middle of the cafeteria, it had found what it was looking for. One of the scientists was trying to flee. The liquid wrapped around the man, pulling him into the air as he shrieked. I stood frozen in terror as I watched the black liquid begin to flow into his mouth, nose, and eyes. And then the most horrifying thing. His body began to contort, bones and muscles twisting in impossible ways. A voice yelled, pulling me out of my shock. It was Nikolai, waving me towards the door. "It's out! Element 0 is out!" I ran towards him, trying not to look back as the man's screams abruptly silenced. Part 2. Nikolai pulled me into a small corridor and slammed the heavy security door shut behind us. Growls and thuds echoed from the cafeteria, as if something was trying to break the door down. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to erase the image of the man being swallowed by the black liquid from my mind. "What the hell was that?" I panted, leaning against the cold wall. "That's why we're here, deep underground," Nikolai replied, his hands trembling as he pulled a pistol from his holster. I didn't even know he was armed. "Element 0, we discovered it in a meteorite 70 years ago. It's not a normal chemical element, it's a living entity." A living entity, that liquid. The liquid is just one of its forms. It can change, adapt, and it's intelligent, Petrov, more intelligent than all of us combined. He glanced at the gun in his hand and gave a bitter laugh, as if this can do anything against it. "This facility, all the research, everything is about that thing?" I asked, trying to comprehend everything. "Mostly, yes, but X2 is more than that. This is where we keep everything too dangerous for the outside world. Technology far beyond our time, knowledge that could destroy civilization, and creatures that shouldn't exist." The alarm lights continued to flash, and the mechanical voice sounded. "The entire facility is on lockdown. All Alpha-level personnel move to Omega Sector for extermination. Red code repeated, Mother." Nikolai's face went pale. "We need to get to a safe place. Come with me." We ran along the corridor, turning right, then left, down a staircase, and through countless doors. I was completely disoriented in this underground labyrinth. Finally, we reached a door marked with the Greek letter Omega. "This is one of the safe rooms," Nikolai explained as he scanned his card and entered a code into the keypad, completely isolated from the rest of the facility. The door opened, and we stepped into a small room where about 10 people were huddled, including Irina and a few other faces I had seen in the cafeteria. They looked up with frightened eyes as we entered. "Petrov," Irina exclaimed, rushing to embrace me. "I thought you were dead." "We're not safe," a weak voice came from the corner of the room. I looked over and saw Colonel Baranov leaning against the wall, blood staining the front of his uniform. "Colonel," Nikolai rushed to his side. "What happened?" "It's smarter than we thought," Baranov whispered, his face pale. "It's been learning, this wasn't random. It planned this. 10 years we studied it. Turns out it was studying us too." I moved closer and saw the wound. A perfect hole in his chest, as if something had pierced straight through. But the edges of the wound were black, and black veins spread out like a macabre net under his skin. "We have to get out of here," an older woman cried, her voice trembling. "To the surface." "Impossible," Baranov rasped, blood welling from the corner of his mouth. "The entire facility is on lockdown. No one in, no one out. Erebus protocol has been activated." "What's Erebus?" I asked, looking around the room filled with terrified faces. "A destruction protocol," Nikolai replied, his voice grim. "If Element 0 cannot be controlled, the entire facility will be obliterated." "Are you talking about nuclear weapons?" Irina asked, her eyes wide with horror. Baranov shook his head weakly. "Not effective enough. We tried that, in 1986. It survived? No. Erebus means isolation and sealing. Concrete will be pumped into every exit. The entire facility will become a giant block of stone with us inside." A heavy silence fell over the room. "How long?" someone's voice asked. 2 hours, Baranov whispered. "Maybe less if the situation deteriorates." He turned to me, his clouded eyes suddenly brightening. "Petrov, the text you're studying, do you understand it?" "I've just started," I replied. "But yes, I've recognized some patterns. It's not an Earth language, but it follows certain logical structures. That text, he said, grabbing my arm, is a warning. They tried to tell us about Element Zero, about how to control it. Who are they? The ones who were here before, he coughed, and a streak of black fluid trickled from his nose. Before it found them, before it does what it's doing to me. Suddenly, he convulsed, his body arching in pain. No, don't, I won't let it, he stammered, his eyes wide, staring into space. Save him, Irina cried, but Nikolai had already raised his gun, pointing it directly at Baranov's head. Stand back, he ordered, he's infected. Wait, I shouted, he can still tell us. A gunshot echoed, and Baranov slumped forward, a black hole in his forehead. I looked at Nikolai in horror. It's procedure, he said coldly, holstering his gun. Anyone infected must be put out of their misery immediately. Misery? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. You just killed him. No, I stopped him from becoming something else, Nikolai replied. Didn't you see the black spreading? Element Zero was already transforming him. Within minutes, he wouldn't have been human anymore. I looked down at Baranov's body, and a chill ran down my spine as I saw the black veins still spreading under his pale skin, even in death. What do we do now? Irina asked, her voice shaking. The archives, I said, a sudden thought striking me. If the text contains information on how to control Element Zero, we need to go back to Sector 37B and get it. Madness, the older woman exclaimed. That area is near where it escaped. Precisely, I said. It escaped near there, perhaps because it knew the importance of those texts. It doesn't want us to decipher them. Nikolai looked at me intently. Or it wants us to think so. Maybe it's luring us there. Either way, I said, it's our only chance. Otherwise, we'll be buried alive here, or worse. I looked down at Baranov's corpse again. Nikolai thought for a moment, then nodded. I'll go with you, but just the two of us. The others will be safer here. I'm coming too, Irina said, standing up. I specialize in quantum cryptography. If these texts are as complex as you think, you'll need me. I didn't argue. 3 people were probably safer than 2. Nikolai checked his gun and handed me a large knife from his belt. Be careful, he said. If you see any signs of infection, skin discoloration, red eyes, strange behavior, tell me immediately. I nodded, clutching the knife, even though I knew how useless it would be against what we were facing. As we prepared to leave the room, the older woman approached and handed me a small tablet. Here, she said, this is a map of the facility, more useful than wandering in the dark. I looked at the screen and saw a complex network of corridors and rooms. The facility was far larger than I had imagined, dozens of levels extending both horizontally and vertically into the earth. Thank you, I said, slipping the tablet into my pocket. One more thing, she whispered. Not everything you see is real. It can make you paranoid, create illusions. Trust your instincts. Nikolai opened the door, peering out into the dark corridor. The emergency lights provided only a faint red glow, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. Ready? He asked. I swallowed my rising fear and nodded. Irina grabbed my hand, her palm cold and trembling. Stay close, Nikolai said as we stepped into the darkness. And remember, whatever happens, don't let it touch you. We moved in silence, only the sound of our footsteps and ragged breaths. Occasionally, a distant roar or the sound of tearing metal echoed. Each time, we froze, holding our breath, listening. As we passed across corridor, I saw a puddle of black liquid on the floor, small ripples disturbing its surface as if it was breathing. Don't look, Nikolai whispered, pulling me past. It senses attention. But as we passed, I heard it, a whisper, like dozens of voices speaking at once in a language I didn't understand. And for a moment, I swore I understood a single word. Michael. I spun around, my heart pounding, but the puddle of black liquid was gone, leaving only an empty floor with no trace. Did you see that? I asked Nikolai, my voice shaking. See what? He looked at me strangely. The puddle, it called my name. Nikolai and Irina exchanged glances. It started, Nikolai said softly. It's trying to get into your head. Don't listen, don't look, just keep moving. We continued. but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. And worse, the feeling that whatever was watching us knew exactly where we were going. As we turned a corner, we suddenly heard human voices, whispers from ahead. Nikolai signaled us to stop and hid in a wall recess. Seconds later, a group of about 5 people passed through the intersection ahead of us. They were in black uniforms, not the white lab coats of the scientists, and they carried pulse rifles. On their chests was a symbol I didn't recognize, a red eye with a black star in the center. "Who are they?" I whispered as they passed without seeing us. "Omega Unit," Nikolai replied, his face tense. "Elite security forces. They're not here to protect us. They're here to make sure nothing gets out, including us, especially us." When the soldiers vanished from sight, we continued moving, treading more softly. According to the tablet, the archives were only a few corridors away. We were passing a door marked K12 when a faint sound echoed out like a sob. "What's that?" Irina stopped listening. "Don't worry about it," Nikolai said, trying to pull her away. "It could be a trap." "No, it sounds like a child," she insisted. I pressed my ear to the door and heard it more clearly, soft, frightened crying. "Someone's inside," I said. "I told you, this isn't the only place we keep dangerous things," Nikolai warned. "Area K is a biocontainment zone. Whatever's in there is there for a good reason." But the crying sounded too human, too distressed. "We have to check," I decided, reaching for the door panel. "Petrov, no." Too late. I had scanned my card, and to my surprise, the door hissed open. The room inside was pitch black, with only a faint light far off. The crying was louder now, coming from a small figure huddled in the corner. "Hello," I called softly. "We're here to help." The figure stirred, and I saw a child, perhaps 8 years old, in a hospital gown. Long blonde hair obscured its face as it looked up. "Help me," it whispered. "I want to go home." I stepped forward, but Nikolai pulled me back. "No one locks up children here," he hissed. "Whatever you think you're seeing, it's not a child." The child lifted its head, and the hair fell away from its face. The face was completely blank, except for a mouth, gaping in a distorted smile too wide for a human face. "Michael," it whispered, its voice no longer a child's. "I've seen the texts. I know what you're looking for." And then it began to melt onto the floor like wax. Its form dissolved into a spreading puddle of black liquid, advancing towards us at an incredible speed. "Run," Nikolai yelled, pulling Irina and me out of the room, slamming the door shut. We heard a thud as something hit the other side. We ran like mad, terror lending strength to our legs. But when I looked down, my heart stopped. A tiny streak of black liquid clung to my shoe, slowly spreading upwards. I gasped as we stopped at a junction. "I think I'm infected." Nikolai looked down at the black liquid on my shoe, his eyes darkening. For a moment, I saw his hand tighten on his gun. "No," Irina screamed, standing between us. "He's not infected." "Move aside, Sokolova," Nikolai ordered, his voice cold. "It's procedure." "Wait," I said quickly, bending down and scraping the black liquid off my shoe with the knife. "It hasn't permeated. Look." I took off my shoe and showed them, no mark on my foot. The black liquid was still clinging to the sole, but it wasn't spreading. Nikolai hesitated, then lowered his gun. "Get rid of it," he said. "Both shoes." I complied without hesitation, throwing the shoes into the farthest corner of the corridor. Now I was barefoot. The concrete floor was freezing, but that was much better than being shot in the head. "It's a repeat of the Omega incident," Nikolai mumbled as we continued moving, his voice tense. "In 1998, we tried to move an element 0 sample to a new facility. It escaped, creating false images to lure personnel. Before it ended, 50 people were dead." "But how did it know what images to create?" I asked, still chilled by the memory of the featureless face of the fake child. "It takes images from our minds," Irina said softly. "Our deepest fears are memories. That's why it called your name, Mike." I recalled the older woman's warning, "Not everything you see is real." Was this what she was talking about? We rounded a corner and finally saw the familiar door marked 37B, our archive target. But something was wrong. The door was already open, and in the dim red light, I saw dark streaks on the floor leading inside. "Blood," Nikolai whispered, kneeling to check. "Fresh." We stepped into the room cautiously, weapons in hand. The sight that greeted us was a true nightmare. Dr. Kuznetsov lay face down on the table, a large pool of blood spreading beneath him. Books and documents were scattered everywhere, many pages torn. "Bloody hell," I whispered, moving to Kuznetsov's side and turning him over. I quickly regretted that decision. A deep gash ran from his chin to his navel, his internal organs spilling out. But the worst was his face. His eyes were wide with pure terror, his mouth twisted as if he had died mid-scream. Irina turned away, nauseated. Even Nikolai was pale. Volkov, I suddenly remembered, looking around the room. He was here too. We found Volkov huddled in a corner of the room, still breathing, but blood trickled from his nose and ears. His right hand clutched a parchment page, protecting it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Volkov," I shook his shoulder, "can you hear me?" His eyes opened, dull and unfocused. "Petrov," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "you're back." "What happened here?" Nikolai asked, sweeping his gun around the room to ensure we were safe. "It came," Volkov rasped, blood welling from the corner of his mouth. "Not the liquid. This time it was a man, or looked like one, carrying a knife. It disemboweled Kuznetsov, laughing while it did it." He trembled violently. "But before it came, I found this." He pushed the parchment page into my hand. "The last page. I translated it. It talks about how to stop element 0. I took the page, seeing alien symbols covering one side with Volkov's scrawled Russian notes beside them. "It will return," Volkov said, grabbing my arm. "It doesn't want us to know. It was written by the visitors, the last ones, before all of them." "Before they what?" I urged. "Before they committed suicide," he whispered. "It was the only way to escape it." Irina had started moving around the room, gathering relevant documents. "We need everything related to element 0, she said. "No time," Nikolai said, checking his watch. "We have less than an hour before Erebus is activated." Volkov's eyes widened. "Erebus, they'll seal the facility." "Yes," I replied. "We need to get out. Can you move?" He tried to stand but collapsed, his face contorted in pain. "No, my spine is broken. It slammed me into the wall." Nikolai stepped forward, his face grim. "We can't take him. He'll slow us down." "We can't abandon him," I protested. "He's right," Volkov said, a drop of blood rolling down his chin. "I'll only drag you down, but let me tell you what I've translated." We knelt beside him, and he spoke in a weak voice. "Element 0 isn't something, it's someone, an ancient life form from another world. It came to Earth in a meteorite, but before that, it destroyed the visitor's world." He coughed, and I supported his head to help him breathe. "It can change shape," he continued. "Infiltrate minds, control bodies. But there's a weakness. It cannot withstand high temperatures, truly high, higher than anything that can be created on Earth, except." "Except what?" I urged. "A thermonuclear reactor?" Irina exclaimed, suddenly understanding. "The lowest level of this facility. That's why it was built here. Not just to keep secrets, but for the reactor, something that can reach the temperature of the sun." "Yes," Volkov whispered, his eyes beginning to close. "But to activate it, it needs 3 safety keys, 3 people, and no one survives." "3 people," Nikolai said, staring into space. Volkov grabbed my wrist. "Petrov, it knows you. It's looking for you. I don't know why, but you're the target. You." "Why me?" "I don't know," he coughed, more blood spewing. "But the text spoke of a person who can connect. Be careful, Petrov. You're not just reading the text is reading you." His eyes became blank, and he let out his last breath. We stood there in silence for a moment, trying to comprehend what he had just said. I felt a new fear, not just of the monster hunting us, but the thought that it was specifically targeting me for some reason. "We need to get to the reactor," Irina finally spoke. "No," Nikolai shook his head. "We need to get to the elevator to the surface." "Didn't you hear what he said?" she asked, her voice rising. "We can't let it escape. If element 0 reaches the surface, it could spread across the world." "That's not our concern," Nikolai said sternly. "My mission is to protect valuable scientists. The reactor is also our only way out," I said, looking down at the map on the tablet. "Look, All the elevators are locked due to Erebus protocol, but there's a maintenance tunnel from the reactor leading to an emergency exit 2 km north of the main facility. Nikolai looked at the map and cursed. Why wasn't I informed of this? Perhaps you weren't meant to know, Irina said, her voice tart. I folded the parchment page and tucked it into my lab coat pocket along with some other documents Irina had handed me. This might be our only chance, I said. Nikolai still hesitated. If we can reach the reactor, he mumbled. And if we can activate it, we can destroy element 0 once and for all, Irina said. Don't you see? This is why we're here. This facility was designed for this moment. And bury ourselves with it? Nikolai asked. 3 safety keys mean 3 people have to stay. A heavy silence enveloped us. I had known this was coming, but hearing Nikolai say it made it more real, more terrifying. So this is what Volkov meant, I said softly. 3 people have to stay and die. To ensure element 0 dies too, Nikolai corrected. It's the only way. There has to be another way, Irina protested, her voice trembling. We could activate it and run to the maintenance tunnel. You said there was an emergency exit. That's why there are 3 keys, Nikolai shook his head. The system is designed to prevent precisely that scenario. Once the Thanatos protocol is activated, all exits are locked, no exceptions. I looked at the clock on the wall. We have 15 minutes before Erebus protocol is activated. If we do nothing, we'll be buried alive here without destroying element 0. Worse, Nikolai said. It will be buried with us, contained but still alive, and if someday someone digs down here. He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all understood the consequences. A resentful, supernatural entity unleashed upon an unprepared world. We have no other choice, I said finally, moving towards the control panel. We have to activate the Thanatos protocol. Michael, Irina grabbed my hand, her eyes tearful. We'll die. I know, I said, feeling a strange calm wash over me. But if we don't do this, many others will die, perhaps the entire world. Irina looked at me intently, then slowly nodded. You're right, I didn't think my first day on the job would end like this. Despite the tense situation, I couldn't help but smile faintly. Not my plan either. The commands are ready, Nikolai said. Each of us will stand at a station. When I count to 3, we'll place our hands on the scanners simultaneously. This will activate the protocol, he swallowed hard, and end this once and for all. I stood before one scanner, Irina at the second, Nikolai at the third. We looked at each other one last time. A wordless understanding, a shared determination between 3 strangers thrust into an unimaginable situation. 1, Nikolai began to count, his voice steady. Suddenly, the red alert light turned blue, and an automated voice announced, Erebus protocol postponed. Alpha 1 level user detected, prioritizing new protocol. We looked at each other in confusion. Alpha 1, what's that? I asked Nikolai. No way, he mumbled, his face pale. Only one person has Alpha 1 access, and he's been dead for a long time. The door behind us opened, and a tall, thin man stepped in. He was about 60, with pure white hair, wearing a black lab coat instead of white. His face was gaunt, but his eyes glowed with unnatural vitality. I'm afraid you've been misinformed, Nikolai, the man said, his voice deep and authoritative. I am still very much alive. Director Orlov, Nikolai whispered as if seeing a ghost. The man, Orlov, smiled as he approached us. I've waited a long time for this moment, Michael Petrov. I tensed, my hand instinctively tightening on the knife in my pocket. You know me. Of course, Orlov scoffed. I was the one who ordered you removed from this facility 32 years ago. I was the one who ordered your memory erased. And I, he paused, his eyes narrowing, was the one who ordered your parents killed. I felt as if I had been physically struck. So it's true, my parents worked here, they died here. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. They betrayed us, Orlov said simply. They began to believe that element 0 wasn't a threat, but an opportunity, a friend. He shook his head. They were wrong, and their naivety almost unleashed that thing on our world. What element 0 said was true, I whispered, feeling the world crumble around me. It spoke to you? Orlov asked, suddenly interested. Fascinating. Of course, it didn't tell you the whole truth, did it? Never. It didn't tell you that your parents tried to merge you with it, did it? They believed that a child with a young, pliable mind could become a bridge between humanity and that thing. I felt nauseous. You're lying. No, Michael, he sighed. Your parents were ready to sacrifice their 3-year-old son to an extraterrestrial entity. And worse, they partially succeeded. They placed a fragment of it inside you before we could stop them. So that's why I was brought back here, I said, beginning to understand. Not for my skills, but because I was already infected. Not just that, Orlov said, rolling his eyes. You are even more naive than your parents. You were brought back here for a very simple reason, to lure element 0 out of its containment. What? Nikolai asked, clearly as surprised as I was. A trap, Orlov sneered. The fragment of element 0 within Michael called out to the rest. It wanted to reunite with its lost part, and when it did, when it revealed itself, we could destroy it once and for all. You used me as bait, I said, feeling both angry and betrayed. You put everyone else in this facility in danger. A necessary sacrifice, Orlov shrugged, and the plan worked. Element 0 revealed itself. Worked, Irina screamed. Dozens are dead. And billions will be saved, Orlov retorted without remorse. Element 0 isn't just an extraterrestrial organism, Sokolova, it's an invader, a vanguard. It destroyed the visitor's world, and Earth would be its next victim if we don't destroy it. Then why stop us? I asked, pointing to the Thanatos control panel. We were about to destroy it. Because you missed a crucial detail, Michael, Orlov said, looking at me intently. You cannot destroy element 0 while a part of it still exists within you. To destroy it, you must reunite with the rest. Only when it is whole is it truly vulnerable. I felt a chill. You want me to merge with it? Exactly what your parents wanted, Orlov sneered. Ironic, isn't it? They wanted you to merge to unleash its potential. I want you to merge to destroy it. No, Irina shook her head violently. That's insane, he'll die. And you think you won't die, Ms. Sokolova? Orlov raised an eyebrow. You were ready to sacrifice yourself just minutes ago. All I ask is that Michael performs that sacrifice in a specific way. Nikolai pulled out his gun, pointing it at Orlov. I don't know what game you're playing, but I don't trust you. You think I'm that thing. Orlov gave a dry laugh. A logical thought, but incorrect. If I were element 0, I wouldn't be proposing a plan to destroy myself, would I? Then prove it, I challenged. Prove you're the real Orlov. He sighed and rolled up his sleeve, showing us a long scar on his arm. A cut from the first experiment with element 0 in 1989. It tried to infect me, but I amputated the infected part. He pulled down his collar, revealing another scar on his neck. And this is the wound from when your father tried to kill me to stop me from destroying what he called his friend. I looked at the scars, unsure what to believe. Everything was happening too fast, too much information, too many intertwining deceptions. Even if what you say is true, I said slowly, I won't merge with element 0. I've seen what it does. I've felt its presence in my mind. It's pure evil. Not evil, Orlov shook his head. Just different. It doesn't understand us just as we don't understand it. But that doesn't matter. You don't need to trust me, Michael. You just need to look at the clock. I turned to look. We had only 8 minutes before Erebus protocol was activated. Let me simplify the situation, Orlov said, his voice now harsher. Either you merge with element 0 and we activate the reactor to destroy it, or we all get buried alive here and it continues to exist, waiting to be unleashed someday. There is no third option. I looked at Irina, then Nikolai. They both looked anxious, but I also saw in their eyes an acknowledgement that Orlov might be right. How? I swallowed hard. How can I merge with it? We already performed the binding ritual to separate it from me. No, Orlov shook his head. You only weakened it temporarily. Its essence is still within you, and the rest of it is still roaming this facility. I can call it here. As if to confirm his words, a small drop of black liquid fell from the ceiling to the floor with a soft plop. Then another drop, and another. Time is running out, Michael, Orlov said, his eyes never leaving mine. Will you be a hero or a coward? I looked at the drops of black liquid slowly coalescing into a small puddle. I thought of all the dead, the horror I had witnessed, and I thought of my parents. Whoever they were, whatever they had done, they had died because of this thing. I'll do it, I finally said, but I need to know one thing first. What? Orlov asked, showing impatience. After I merge with it, will I still be me? Orlov paused, and for the first time I saw a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. No, he finally admitted. You and it will become a new entity. Not human, not element zero, something else. You can't do this, Irina grabbed my arm. There has to be another way. There isn't, I said, gently removing her hand, and there's no more time. The puddle of black liquid was larger now. It began to move towards me as if conscious of my presence. I could feel it calling to me, a strange tug in my mind that I couldn't explain. How do I do this? I asked, staring at the black liquid. Simply touch it, Orlov said. It will do the rest. Nikolai, still holding his gun, hesitated between aiming at Orlov or the growing puddle of liquid. I don't trust you, he growled at Orlov. There's something you're not telling us. There are a million things I'm not telling you, Orlov retorted. We don't have time for all of them, but I'm telling the truth about this. This is the only way to destroy Element Zero. I looked at Irina one last time, seeing tears rolling down her cheeks. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to know each other better, I said softly. Don't talk like this is goodbye, she whispered. It is, I gave a sad smile, at least for the human me. I stepped towards the puddle of black liquid, feeling it react to my approach, coiling with strange eagerness. This was the final decision, my sacrifice. If I could save the world by giving up my humanity, it was a trade I was willing to make. Michael Petrov, the liquid whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. Finally, we will be one. I knelt and reached out, my fingers trembling as they drew closer and closer to the shimmering surface of Element Zero. For my parents, I whispered, for all who have died. And I plunged my hand into the black liquid. Part 3. The pain was immediate. An indescribable burning sensation spread from my fingertips up my arm, then to my shoulder, neck, and finally overwhelmed my mind. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, the black liquid began to climb my arm with incredible speed, as if joyous to be reunited with its lost part. Mike, Irina's voice echoed from far away, as if through a long tunnel. My vision flickered between light and dark. My body was no longer mine. I felt Element Zero spreading throughout me, flowing into my bloodstream, permeating my bones, invading my cells. A whirlwind of images and sounds flooded my mind. Thousands of memories, none of them mine. I saw an alien sky with 3 suns hanging over a purple horizon. I saw tall, thin creatures with pale blue skin and large black eyes, the visitors. I saw them building a magnificent civilization, with complex architecture reaching to the sky and technology far beyond human comprehension. And then I saw the arrival of Element Zero in their world, a black meteorite falling from the sky, carrying what they initially considered a miracle, a substance that could change shape, enhance intelligence, and extend life. They studied it, experimented with it, worshipped it. And then came the betrayal. Element Zero began to usurp bodies, transforming the visitors into doll-like figures, empty husks for its collective consciousness. The remaining ones, those who resisted, made a desperate effort to stop it. They knew they couldn't destroy it, so they encased it in a spaceship and launched it into deep space, hoping it would drift forever. But instead, it found Earth. We are one, a voice echoed in my head, no longer a sound, but a part of my own consciousness. Finally, perfect. No, I tried to resist, tried to hold on to my own identity. I am Michael Petrov, I am human. Both, neither, all, the voice replied. I opened my eyes, not realizing I had closed them. The world looked different. I could see spectra of light that humans previously couldn't perceive. I could see energy flowing through the reactor, watching electrons dance, feeling electromagnetic fields vibrating in the air. I looked down at my hands and saw that my skin had turned a glossy black, not as if covered by liquid, but as if it had become a part of me. Intricate spiral patterns ran along my arms, emitting a faint blue glow. "My God," I heard Nikolai whisper, "it's happened." I stood up, feeling a new surge of strength in my body. I was no longer in pain. The wound on my leg had vanished, healed by element 0. "Michael," Irina called, her voice trembling, "are you still you?" I turned towards her, seeing her take a step back. I saw fear in her eyes, and a part of me wanted to reassure her that I was still me, but I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. I started to say, my voice echoing strangely as if multiple voices spoke at once. "I am Mike, but I am also more." "Too perfect," Orlov said, his eyes lighting up with an unhealthy scientific excitement. "Complete integration. Michael Petrov and Element 0 are no longer separate entities. They have become a new organism." "This state is unstable," I said, feeling the ceaseless flow of information and memories in my mind. "I cannot maintain it for long." "You don't need to maintain it for long," Orlov said, stepping towards the Thanatos control panel. "Just long enough for us to activate the reactor." But as I stood there, continuing to absorb Element 0's knowledge and memories, I began to understand more clearly. The pieces began to fit together, and a horrifying truth slowly dawned. "You're lying," I said, looking directly at Orlov. "You never intended to destroy Element 0. Orlov froze, looking at me warily. "What are you talking about?" "I can see it now. I can access its memories." I took a step forward, feeling my power grow with each moment. "You don't want to end this. You want to control it. You always have." Nikolai and Irina looked back and forth between us, clearly confused. "What is Michael talking about?" Irina asked Orlov. "He's lying," Orlov retorted, but I could see the anxiety in his eyes. "That's not Mike anymore. That's Element 0 using his body, trying to deceive you." "No," I shook my head. "I'm still Mike, but now I know the truth. I know about Project Prometheus." Orlov's face went pale. "How could you?" "What is Project Prometheus?" Nikolai asked, his gun now pointing alternately between me and Orlov. "His secret project," I replied, never taking my eyes off Orlov. "An attempt to harvest and weaponize Element 0. Not to destroy it, but to turn it into the most advanced bioweapon ever created. A weapon that can change shape, infiltrate any facility, and usurp any enemy. That's why he never activated Thanatos Protocol before." I continued, the pieces still fitting together. "That's why he faked his death, to continue his work in secret, unsupervised." "You don't understand the power we're talking about," Orlov growled. "Element 0 could revolutionize everything: medicine, technology, warfare. It could restore Russia to superpower status. Destroying it is a crime against humanity's potential." "Potential?" I scoffed, feeling both Mike's anger and Element 0's disgust. "Don't you see what it did to the visitors, what it will do to humanity?" "That's because they were weak," Orlov protested. "They tried to befriend it. We will master it." Nikolai had his gun trained on Orlov. "I've worked with you for years, and this is the real reason, to create a weapon, the cause of so many of my comrades' deaths." "Don't be naive, Nikolai," Orlov snapped. "What do you think this facility was funded for? For pure scientific research. Everything here is about power. Power to protect our country, to ensure our survival. By unleashing a creature that can wipe out entire civilizations," Irina screamed. "I can control it," Orlov insisted. "With Michael as a host, we can direct it, train it, use it." I shook my head, feeling indignation rise. "You can't control it. No one can. It will wait and learn and adapt, and eventually it will escape." "Perhaps," Orlov conceded with a small smile. "But by then, I will have harvested enough to create a more docile version, a version I can completely control." The clock on the wall showed only 4 minutes until Erebus Protocol was activated. Time was running out. "I can't let you do that," I said, moving towards the control panel. "What do you think you're doing?" Orlov asked, his face contorted in rage. "You'll die if the reactor is activated, both you and Element 0. "I know," I replied. "It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make." "Foolish," Orlov roared, pulling a small pistol from his lab coat. "You think you're a hero? You're just a tool, an experiment. The son of 2 scientists who tried to halt progress for their foolish ideals." He fired, and I felt the bullet hit my chest, but there was no pain. Instead, the wound quickly closed as Element Zero repaired my body. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," I said, continuing to advance towards the control panel. "It's not a tool or a weapon, it's an invader, a predator, and humanity is its prey." Orlov fired again, at my head this time. I felt a sharp pain, then it quickly vanished. I kept moving forward. "Nikolai, shoot him," Orlov screamed. Nikolai hesitated, his gun still pointed at Orlov. "I don't know who's telling the truth anymore." "Humanity's survival depends on this decision," Orlov shrieked, desperation evident in his voice. "Shoot him before it's too late." I reached the control panel. "Irina, Nikolai," I said without turning around. "I need you, 3 keys, 3 people, remember." "Michael, if we do this, we'll all die," Irina said, her voice trembling. "I know," I replied, "but it's the only way. If a part of Element Zero survives, even a single drop, it could start again. It must be completely destroyed." Nikolai stepped towards the control panel, his gun still aimed at Orlov. "I've lost too many friends to this thing. I won't let anyone else die in vain." "You don't understand its value," Orlov yelled, his eyes wide with a manic gleam. "You're destroying humanity's only chance to." Nikolai fired a shot into Orlov's leg, making him fall with a cry of pain. "I've heard enough," he said, his voice cold. Irina looked between me and the door, as if considering fleeing. But then she sighed and stepped to her position at the control panel. "I hope you're right, Michael, for everyone's sake." "Don't do this," Orlov whimpered, trying to crawl towards us, leaving a trail of blood on the floor. "You don't understand what you're giving up." I looked at him, feeling both pity and disgust. "I understand better than you think. I've seen what Element Zero did to the visitors. I've seen what it dreams of doing to humans, and I won't let that happen." I turned back to the control panel where Nikolai and Irina were waiting. Their hands were ready on the biometric scanners. "Ready?" I asked. They nodded, their eyes filled with determination despite their fear. 1, I began to count, feeling the Element Zero within me struggle, trying to regain control. 2, I continued, focusing all my will to maintain control. 3, we shouted in unison, placing our hands on the 3 scanners at the same time. A blue light scanned our hands, and the control panel screen turned red. An automated voice announced, "Thanatos protocol activated. Self-destruct in 60 seconds." The blue energy column in the center of the room began to vibrate more intensely, its light growing blinding. The temperature in the room rose rapidly. "No," Orlov screamed, trying to crawl towards the control panel. "Stop, you don't know what you're doing." But it was too late. The exits around the room slammed shut and locked with a heavy metallic clang. We were trapped inside with a thermonuclear reactor about to explode. 50 seconds, the automated voice announced. "We did it," Irina said, grabbing my hand. "We stopped it." But as she spoke, I felt a terrible pain tear through my body. Element Zero was reacting to the rising temperature, trying to escape from me. "It's trying to get out," I gasped, doubling over in pain. "I can't hold it much longer." 40 seconds, fight, Mike," Nikolai said, standing beside me. "Just a few more minutes." My skin began to crack. Black liquid oozed from the fissures. I felt as if I was being torn apart from the inside, but I knew I had to hold it back. If it escaped, it could find a new host, or worse, find a way out of the reactor chamber. 30 seconds, how can it escape this room? I asked, the pain nearly overwhelming me. "The doors are locked." "The ventilation shafts," Orlov chuckled weakly, blood trickling from his lips. "There are always ventilation shafts. It's smart enough to find them." I looked up and saw the ventilation shafts in the ceiling, small but large enough for Element Zero in liquid form. 20 seconds. "Michael, it's getting out," Irina gasped, pointing at the streams of black liquid pouring from the cracks in my skin, moving towards the ventilation shafts. I knew I had only one choice. With a final effort, I concentrated all my remaining strength and lunged towards the reactor. "Irina's Nikolai," I yelled. 10 seconds. I slammed into the safety barrier, feeling the terrible heat searing my skin. I gritted my teeth and pressed onward, dragging the element zero that was trying to escape my body. For my parents, I whispered. For everyone. 3-2. I looked back at Irina and Nikolai one last time. They were clinging to each other, eyes wide with horror. And then I leapt into the glowing blue core of the reactor. A flash of unimaginable pain as the heat of the sun incinerated every cell in my body. But then, suddenly, it vanished. I felt element zero scream in my mind, a horrifying sound that was extinguished as it vaporized in the terrible heat. Then the world around me exploded in a blinding flash of white light and pure energy. And then there was only darkness, complete and absolute darkness with no sense of time or space. No pain, no thought, only nothingness. And then a small spark of light, a vague sensation, a distant whisper. Life signs. Unbelievable. I tried to open my eyes, but I couldn't feel my body. I wasn't sure if I still existed in any physical form. Perhaps this was death or some kind of hell. The voices became clearer. Vital signs are stabilizing. He's waking up. Impossible. No one could have survived that explosion, yet he has, at least in part. Sensations slowly returned. First, the pain, a dull ache spreading everywhere. Then, the feeling of a heavy, alien body as if it wasn't entirely mine. I tried again and finally managed to open my eyes. The blinding light made me shut them immediately. Slowly, I opened my eyes again, letting them adjust. I was lying in a white room, surrounded by medical machinery. The steady beep of a heart monitor, the strong smell of antiseptic in the air. A man in a white lab coat stood beside the bed, checking the monitors. He turned when he noticed I was awake. "Hello, Dr. Petrov," he said, his voice strangely calm. "I am Dr. Kuznetsov, not the one you knew," he added, seeing my startled expression, "but a namesake. You are in a special government medical facility. You've been here for 3 months. 3 months, I tried to say, my voice hoarse from disuse. The reactor. It was destroyed, along with the entire Exmonii facility, Kuznetsov said, pouring me a glass of water. You are the sole survivor. I drank the water, feeling it soothe my dry throat. Impossible. I jumped into the reactor. I felt it incinerate me. Indeed, another voice said. A tall man in a military uniform entered the room. You were effectively dead, Dr. Petrov, at least by all medical definitions. I don't understand, I mumbled, trying to sit up but failing. Allow me to introduce myself, the man said. I am General Morozov, Russian military intelligence, and you, Dr. Petrov, are a miracle of science. I looked down at my body and froze in horror. From the waist down, I was gone. My legs were missing, replaced by thick bandages wrapped around my lower torso. My legs, I whispered, feeling nausea rise. Lost in the explosion, Kuznetsov said gently. Along with most of your internal organs, 60% of your skin, and about 40% of your muscle mass. It's truly inexplicable why you are alive. But we have some theories, Morozov said, his eyes gleaming with an unhealthy curiosity. Element zero. It transformed you in ways we still don't fully understand. Frightened, I looked down at my arm. My skin was its normal flesh color, no longer the glossy black it had been after merging with element zero. There was no sign of the black liquid or the glowing veins. It's gone, I said. It was destroyed in the reactor. We believe so, Morozov nodded. But not before it altered your DNA. You are no longer entirely human, Dr. Petrov. Your cells regenerate at an extraordinary rate. Your immune system fights off all diseases and infections. And most importantly, you have the ability to survive injuries that should have been immediately fatal. But I can't regrow my legs, I asked, still dazed by the information. No, Kuznetsov shook his head. There appear to be limits to your regenerative abilities. Organs can recover, but completely lost limbs cannot. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb it all. Irina and Nikolai, are they dead? Yes, Morozov replied curtly. Along with everyone else in the facility, you are the only survivor. The mental pain was worse than the physical. And element zero, is it truly gone? By every test we can perform, there is no trace of it left in you or in the rubble of the Exmonii facility, Kuznetsov replied. The reactor reached temperatures high enough to destroy it completely, just as the ancient texts predicted. Good, I sighed, feeling a flicker of relief amidst the pain and loss. So what happens to me now? Morozov and Kuznetsov exchanged glances. You understand that you are an invaluable source of information about element zero, Morozov said, his voice becoming more businesslike. And your body is a scientific marvel. We want you to remain here for continued research and observation. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm afraid that's not an option, Dr. Petrov, Morozov smiled faintly. According to all official records, you died in a car accident 3 months ago. A funeral was held. Even your neighbors don't know you're alive. I closed my eyes, trying not to let despair swallow me. So I'm a prisoner. I prefer to think of you as an honored guest, Morozov said, a hint of irony in his voice. You will be provided with every comfort: books, music, entertainment, even research work if you desire. And of course, he gestured to my non-existent legs, we will provide you with the most advanced wheelchair. Just like that, I understood my new life. From an ordinary linguist to a living experiment, a scientific phenomenon to be studied and tested. A prisoner in a gilded cage. I need rest, I finally said, exhausted by the pain and the revelations. Of course, Kuznetsov nodded, injecting something into my IV. We'll talk more when you're stronger. As the medication began to take effect, I heard Morozov say to Kuznetsov before they left, "Has he spoken about the dreams?" Not yet, Kuznetsov replied. But brainwave recordings show abnormal activity while he sleeps. Very strange patterns. Continue to monitor and increase security. We cannot risk if something is still left in him. Their voices faded as I drifted into sleep. But this time, unlike the periods of unconsciousness before, I dreamt. I dreamt of the sky with 3 suns, of the tall, thin creatures with pale blue skin. I dreamt of the lost world of the visitors. But the strangest thing was that I wasn't an observer in these dreams. I was one of them, a visitor, moving through wondrous cities with architecture incomprehensible to the human mind. And I wasn't alone. There were others, not visitors, but humans. Familiar faces. Irina, a radiant smile as she solved a complex equation on a futuristic console. Nikolai, standing guard at the city gates, his gun replaced by a glowing energy weapon. Kuznetsov and Volkov studying ancient texts in a library so vast it seemed endless. And 2 people I only recognized from an old photograph. My parents, smiling and waving from a paradisiacal garden of strange, vibrant plants. In this dream, I felt a sense of peace and purpose I had never felt while awake. The feeling that despite all that was lost, something new was being created. A second chance. As I slowly woke, the feeling faded, leaving a strange and persistent sense of hope. I opened my eyes in the sterile white hospital room, returning to the reality of my missing legs and a future as a prisoner. But something had changed. A vague idea, a feeling, a plan was forming. Because in those dreams, I had seen something that Morozov and Kuznetsov didn't know. Couldn't know. My parents' research didn't stop at connecting me to element zero. They had gone further, anticipating the outcome, preparing for what was to come. I looked down at my arm, focusing on a small spot near my wrist. For a moment, my skin became translucent, allowing me to see the blood vessels beneath, and among them, a tiny black speck, no larger than a pinhead. A seed. The smallest possible fragment of element zero, transformed and controlled by my DNA, hidden from all scanners and tests. Not enough to cause harm, not enough to spread or control, but enough to remember, enough to connect, enough to perhaps, someday, rebuild what was lost. Not today, I whispered to myself, letting the seed sink deeper into my body, invisible again. But someday. I lay back and waited for the doctors to come for their checkup. I would be their patient. I would be their experiment. I would play the part of the grateful survivor, the disabled man no longer a threat. And in the meantime, I would dream of the sky with 3 suns, and I would wait. Part 5. 6 months passed in the secret research facility. 6 months of incessant tests, interviews, and monitoring. 6 months of a new life in a wheelchair, learning to adapt to a body that was no longer whole. I had become a good actor. I showed cooperation, gratitude for being saved, and acceptance of my fate. I answered every question about Element Zero, telling them everything I knew or almost everything. Some secrets I kept to myself. Like the tiny black seed flowing in my blood, still hidden from their most sophisticated scanners. And the dreams of the visitor's world became more detailed, more vivid each night. "Did you sleep well, Dr. Petrov?" Dr. Kuznetsov asked during our usual morning checkup. "Like a baby," I smiled. The familiar lie flowed out easily. "No dreams." He looked at the monitoring board. "Interesting, because your brainwave readings showed strong REM activity last night. Very strong." "I don't remember," I shrugged. "Maybe I dreamt but didn't recall it upon waking." Kuznetsov observed me, his eyes full of suspicion. After 6 months, the cat-and-mouse game between us had become sophisticated. He knew I was hiding something but couldn't prove it, and I knew he didn't trust me but still had to play by the rules. "All right," he finally said, putting down his clipboard. "You have a visitor today." I was surprised. In my 6 months here, I had never seen anyone other than the doctors, nurses, and General Morozov. "Who is it?" "You'll know soon enough. Dress appropriately." Kuznetsov left, leaving me with curiosity and unease. I moved my electric wheelchair to the wardrobe, an advanced device with sensitive controls and agile maneuverability. As Morozov had promised, I was provided with every comfort. The room was spacious, the clothes fine, entertainment devices, books, a gilded cage with invisible bars. I put on a white shirt and black trousers, careful not to let the seed within me react to emotion. I had learned to control it, keeping it silent and hidden. But sometimes, if I felt stressed or excited, it could stir, and I dared not risk its detection. 2 hours later, a knock came and a woman entered. Not my usual nurse, but a tall, slender woman with dark hair pulled back neatly. She wore a gray business suit and carried a briefcase. "Dr. Petrov," she greeted, her voice professional and cold. "I am Dr. Yelena Volkova from the Ministry of Defense." "An honor to meet you," I replied, offering a polite smile. "I must admit, I'm surprised to have a visitor." "I can understand that," she nodded, sitting in the chair opposite me. "You've been in isolation for quite some time." Her gaze swept over me, assessing, especially my lower half, where a blanket concealed the absence of my legs. I was used to those stares but still found them unsettling. "I'm here to assess your condition," she continued, "and to discuss some new developments." "What developments?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though my heart was beating faster. "Our researchers have analyzed the data from your DNA samples." She opened her briefcase and took out a file. "We have identified the specific changes element 0 made in your genetic structure. The changes are quite astonishing." "I know," I nodded. "I've been briefed on my rapid regeneration and enhanced immune system." "That's just the tip of the iceberg, Dr. Petrov." She smiled faintly. "Your DNA has been re-engineered at a fundamental level. To put it simply, you are the next step in human evolution." I looked at her intently, trying to determine her true motives. "I don't feel like the next step in evolution. I feel like a cripple who's being held captive." "A temporary inconvenience," she waved her hand, completely unmoved by my sarcasm. "We believe that with a full understanding of how Element 0 transformed you, we can replicate those changes in other individuals." "Individuals?" I raised an eyebrow. "You speak as if you're talking about lab rats." "Rats first, of course," she nodded, "then human volunteers." "Are you talking about creating more people like me?" I asked, horror slowly rising. "That's a terrible idea. Element 0 almost destroyed the world." "Element 0 is gone," she replied, her face hardening. "Only the genetic changes it created in you remain, changes that could offer immense benefits to the military, medicine, and many other fields." I understood. This was exactly what Orlov had dreamed of, weaponizing Element 0. But instead of using it directly, they were using what it had left behind in me. "And if I refused to cooperate?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You understand that this isn't a request, don't you, Dr. Petrov?" Yelena smiled coldly. "You are an asset of the Russian state, a very valuable asset, but an asset nonetheless." "I used to be a human," I countered, feeling anger rise. "I still am a human." Not entirely, she replied, her voice chilling, and that makes you special. I felt the seed inside react to my anger, moving along the blood vessels from my wrist up my arm. I focused to control it, pushing it back to its safe, hidden position. You have no choice, Dr. Petrov, Yelena continued. You will be transferred to a new facility tomorrow, a place with better equipment for studying and replicating what happened to you. And if your experiments fail, I asked, if you can't replicate the changes without accidentally recreating element 0. That's a risk we're willing to take, she shrugged. Science requires sacrifice. Whose sacrifice? I growled. Whomever is necessary, she replied without hesitation. As she stood to leave, I realized my time was up. If I was transferred to a new facility, likely one with tighter security and more scanners, they would eventually detect the seed, and then I would become a true guinea pig. Get some rest, Dr. Petrov, Yelena said as she reached the door. Tomorrow will be a long day. After she left, I moved my wheelchair to the room's large window. The facility was somewhere in a forest, probably Siberia, with tall pines and fresh snow under a gray sky. A beautiful prison, but a prison nonetheless. That evening, I lay in bed, feigning sleep while the security cameras monitored, my mind racing for an escape, a plan. And then, when everyone thought I was sound asleep, I allowed myself to sink into a different state. Not ordinary sleep, but a near-meditative trance I had learned over the months. I focused on the seed within, feeling it, connecting with it, and from within, I allowed it to grow. Not externally, where it could be detected, but internally in my mind. The visitor's world opened again. But this time, I wasn't just an observer. I was the creator, building, designing, molding it to my will. In this semi-waking, semi-dream state, I began to understand the true power of the seed. It wasn't just a fragment of element 0. It was a gateway, a connection to something far greater, a space of consciousness that no one, not even the visitors, fully understood. And from that space, I could reach out, touch, change things. I saw the facility's computer systems, the network of security cameras, the electronic locks on the doors. I saw the electronic pulses, the circuits, the data streams, and with a mental effort, I could manipulate them. First, the camera in my room, a small glitch in the signal made it loop footage of me sleeping. Then, the door lock, a faint electrical pulse made it open without triggering an alarm. I opened my eyes back to reality, my heart pounding with excitement and fear. I looked up at the camera, the indicator light was still on, but I knew it was broadcasting old footage. I looked towards the door, the lock was open. This was my chance. I quickly transferred from the bed to my wheelchair, put on the warmest clothes I had, and grabbed a small bag I had prepared with some essentials. I moved to the door, listening for footsteps in the corridor. Nothing. Slowly, I opened the door and peered out. The corridor was empty, lit only by the faint emergency lights. I knew the layout of this floor from my test sessions. I knew where the doctors and guards rested, and I knew the way out. I moved the wheelchair down the corridor, my mind still partially connected to that altered state, using it to disable each security camera as I passed. At the elevator, I encountered my first obstacle. It required a security card, which I didn't have. But again, I focused on the seed, allowing it to connect to the elevator's electrical circuits. Not as simple as the cameras, but after a moment of effort, I felt the system yield, and the elevator doors opened. On the way down to the ground floor, I felt a sharp pain in my head, the cost of using this power. But I had no other choice. I had to get out before they transferred me tomorrow. When the elevator stopped on the ground floor, I held my breath, preparing for the possibility of guards waiting. But as the doors opened, I saw only an empty lobby with an unmanned reception desk and the exit door far off. I moved quickly through the lobby, heading towards the door. A camera swung towards me, but I focused and made it go dead. The front door was secured by a more complex security system, but with a mental effort that nearly made me pass out, I felt it open. The cold air of the Siberian night rushed in as I pushed my wheelchair outside. Snow covered everything, and I knew the wheelchair would struggle, but I was prepared for this. Not far off, parked in a small lot, was an SUV that the doctors used. I moved towards it, using the seed's power to disable the alarm system and unlock it. Each time I used the power, the pain in my head worsened, but I pressed on. Reaching the vehicle, I opened the door and tried to lift myself into the driver's seat. A difficult task for a man without legs, but with perseverance and a little help from my new power, I managed. I put the wheelchair in the back seat and focused on the car's electrical system. The engine started, breaking the silence of the Siberian night. I knew I didn't have much time. The noise would alert the guards. I pressed the accelerator, and the car sped out of the parking lot, heading for the only road leading out of the facility. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw lights turning on in the building, and I could hear sirens in the distance. They had discovered my escape, but I was too far gone to be caught. I raced the car down the snowy road into the dark pine forest. I didn't know exactly where this place was, or where the nearest human settlement was. I only knew that I had to go as far as possible before dawn. As I drove, I felt a strange sensation. Not complete freedom, but the beginning of something. A first step on a long road. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew what awaited me. A new world needed to be built. A world I had seen in my dreams. And as I glanced in the rearview mirror again, I saw lights moving on the road behind. Their cars were chasing me. The hunt had begun. The headlights grew larger in the rearview mirror, cutting through the darkness like strange, predatory eyes. I stomped the accelerator, or more accurately, pushed the pedal down with my hand. The SUV roared on the snow-covered road. Driving without legs was a challenge, one I hadn't prepared for, but the instinct for survival was a great teacher. "Come on, you bastards," I muttered, glancing at my pursuers. 3 cars, maybe 4, were closing the gap. They had professional drivers, both legs intact, and most importantly, they knew the terrain. A sharp bend appeared ahead, and I nearly lost control trying to keep the car on the road. Branches scraped against the car windows like skeletal hands trying to grab me. The thick pine forest on either side of the road was dark and menacing. I didn't know where I was, but from the temperature and type of vegetation, I guessed it was somewhere in northern Siberia, far from any major city. That meant I needed to travel a long distance before I could find help. If anyone would be willing to help a legless man being pursued by the government. Suddenly, in the rearview mirror, I saw a flash of light from the lead car, not headlights. Damn it! I swerved sharply as bullets ripped through the air. They were shooting at my car. Not to kill, they wanted me alive. But to disable the car, to force me to stop. I didn't have many options. I couldn't outrun them forever. Even if I could lose them, they would call for reinforcements, helicopters, tracking dogs. The full force would be deployed to apprehend me. Michael Petrov, a priceless national asset, could not be lost. I needed another plan, another bullet, this time hitting the rear tire. The car swayed violently, but I maintained control. The anti-skid system was working at full capacity on the snowy road. I saw a small turn ahead, a narrow track barely visible in the dark. Without thinking, I swerved hard, turning the steering wheel sharply, and plunged onto the track. Branches scraped the car's body as I pushed the SUV through the narrow passage. Pine needles covered the windshield. The road gradually turned into a rough, bumpy trail. The car bounced violently, and I had to grip the steering wheel tightly to avoid being thrown from the seat. No seatbelt. I had removed it to make it easier to climb into the car with my remaining torso. Behind me, the headlights of the pursuing cars faded, then disappeared completely. They hadn't seen me turn onto this secret path, or simply their vehicles couldn't navigate such a narrow track. I breathed a sigh of relief, but only for a moment. I knew this only bought me a little time. They would turn back to search for my tracks. The track ended abruptly in a clearing, a small patch of land next to a frozen stream. I stopped the car, turned off the lights and the engine. Now I could hear distant sirens, the sound of vehicles, and occasionally barking dogs. They had already deployed search teams. I couldn't go any further by car, and I clearly couldn't walk. I needed another option. Looking around the car, I realized there were a few things that might be useful: an emergency blanket in the trunk, a first aid kit, and a radio, but nothing that could truly help me escape this cold wilderness. I looked out at the frozen stream, and an idea sparked. If I couldn't go through the forest, perhaps I could follow the stream. Water always flowed somewhere, maybe a village, a town. But how to move? I couldn't use a wheelchair on ice and snow. I looked at the parked SUV, and a crazy idea came to me. The rear door of the car could be removed if needed. It was part of the safety design in emergencies, and it could become a makeshift sled. Without wasting time, I moved from the driver's seat to the back of the car, dragging my weakened body. I began to detach the rear door, using a piece of metal from the kit to pry open the safety levers. After about 10 minutes of struggling, the door was removed from its hinges. I pulled the door out of the car, placed it on the ground, and inspected it. It wasn't ideal, but it would work, a temporary snow sled. I gathered what I could carry: the emergency blanket, the first aid kit, a bottle of water I found in the glove compartment, and a flashlight. I strapped everything to my jacket, then climbed onto the makeshift sled. I pushed myself towards the stream. The door slid quite well on the snow, and I quickly reached the bank. The ice surface looked thick and solid, but I was still cautious, testing it by pushing the sled down first, then observing its reaction. The ice held the weight. I climbed onto the sled, using my hands as paddles, and began to move along the frozen stream. I chose to go downstream, hoping it would lead to a populated area. In the distance, the barking dogs grew closer. They had found my turn and were following my car's tracks. I pushed faster, my hands aching from the effort. It was late at night, the temperature so low that my breath froze in the air. When I looked back, I saw flashlight beams flickering between the trees. They had reached my temporary parking spot. They would soon figure out where I had gone. I continued to push faster, trying my utmost. The frozen stream became wider, flowed faster. Beneath the transparent ice, I could see the dark water flowing swiftly. Suddenly, I heard a small but ominous sound. The ice beneath my makeshift sled was beginning to crack. No, I whispered, trying to steer towards the bank. But it was too late. With a final crunch, the ice broke and my sled, with me on it, plunged into the freezing water. The shock of contact with the cold water nearly knocked me unconscious. I struggled, trying to cling to the sinking door. The current pulled me down, but without heavy legs, I realized I floated more easily than before. A small advantage from a great loss. I clung to the door as if to life, letting it carry me downstream. Behind me, I heard shouts, sirens. They had found the crack in the ice but couldn't follow me into the freezing water. The cold water was like a knife cutting through my skin. I knew I couldn't endure it for long. Hypothermia would kill me within minutes. But then I felt a sensation. The black seed in my body was moving, reacting to the danger. It spread throughout my body, creating a thin, insulating layer under my skin. I was still cold, but not to the point of paralysis. I could still move, still think. The stream carried me faster, wider, as it merged with a larger flow. Broken ice flows shimmered in the moonlight, deadly beautiful. Suddenly, I saw lights ahead, not from the moon or stars, but artificial lights. A bridge spanned the river, and beneath it I could see the wooden huts of a small village. I tried to steer my makeshift raft towards the bank, but the current was too strong, pulling me straight towards the bridge. As I drew near, I realized the danger. The bridge pylons would crush me and the raft if I hit them. I had only one chance. I had to grab onto one of those pylons as I passed. As I was only a few meters from the bridge, I tensed, ready for a final leap. The raft hit an ice floe, spun, and I was thrown forward, towards a large bridge pylon. In a split second, I reached out, trying to grab anything. My fingers brushed the slippery surface of the pylon, slid, and then found purchase on a piece of protruding wood. I hung there, half my body still in the freezing water, drops of ice forming on my clothes. I looked down and saw my makeshift raft being carried away, breaking apart as it hit the next pylon. I began to pull myself up, little by little, shivering, soaking wet, but alive. From this position, I could see the faint lights of the village, only about 500 meters away. If I could reach it, perhaps I could find help. Maybe a car, money, dry clothes, anything to continue my escape. But as I pulled myself out of the water, I realized something was wrong. I no longer felt cold. In fact, I began to feel warm, not in a comfortable way. An unusual fever was spreading throughout my body, starting from where the black seed lay hidden. I felt it move, reacting to something. No, I whispered, trying to suppress it with my will. Not now, but it was too late. The seed was expanding, spreading through my bloodstream, reacting to the shock, the temperature, and my near drowning. It was trying to protect me in its own way. My skin began to change, turning dark and glossy in the areas where the seed had spread. I hadn't used its full power in months, had kept it hidden and restrained. Now it was asserting control. Not like this, I gritted my teeth, trying to control the transformation. If I transformed completely, the village wouldn't be a refuge, it would become a threat. The innocent residents would flee from the monster I was becoming, or worse, try to kill me. I tried to focus, using the mental techniques I had developed. I had to find a balance. Use enough power to survive, but not enough to transform completely. The darkening of my skin gradually stopped, covering only a small part of my body. I felt a strange source of power flowing through me, healing my wounds, repelling the cold, strengthening my muscles. With this newfound strength, I pulled myself onto the bridge, crawling along the path with my hands and remaining torso. It was a pathetic sight. A legless man, soaked and half-frozen, dragging himself along the road like a wounded animal. But I had escaped my pursuers, at least temporarily. And before me, the lights of the village shone like a beacon, a place where I could hide, rest, and plan my next step, because I already had a plan forming. A plan born from the dreams of the visitor's world and from the new understanding of the seed within me. A plan not just to survive, but to create something entirely new. But first, I needed to survive this night. And as I began to reach the edge of the village, I smelled smoke and food, heard human voices and faint music, the sounds of life, of civilization. In the darkness, I whispered a promise to myself. Michael Petrov died in the reactor explosion, but something new had been born from the ashes, and the world would soon know it. Part 6. I crawled into the village like a wounded animal, dragging my soaked body across the hard snow. It was well past midnight. Most houses were dark, with only a few faint lights flickering behind closed windows. The village was smaller than I imagined, only about 20 traditional Siberian wooden houses, a general store, and a larger building that seemed to be the local tavern. I headed towards the tavern, the only place with strong light and sounds of life. As I approached, I could hear chatter and laughter mixed with music from an old radio. At least there were people there, warmth, but I couldn't just barge in, not in my current state. A legless man, soaking wet, with patches of glossy black skin on parts of my body I would cause panic. I needed help, but I had to approach carefully. As I hid among the shadows beside the tavern, I heard the door open, and two men stepped out, clearly tipsy. They were speaking Russian with heavy local accents, laughing about a joke I didn't quite understand. "Ivan will regret betting against me," the older man laughed loudly. "No one catches more fish than me this winter." "You wouldn't say that if you knew where he set his traps," the other replied, his cigarette glowing red in the dark. They parted ways at the crossroads. The older man went right, along the main road, while the smoker turned left, heading towards a small house near the river. I made a quick decision and began to follow the second man. He was going alone to an isolated house, less likely to cause a stir. The man's small house was about 100 meters from the tavern. I followed him in the dark, moving as fast as I could with my incomplete body. The crunch of snow under my hands and body made him turn once, but he seemed to dismiss the sound as that of a small animal in the night. When the man opened his door and stepped inside, I was nearly there. I waited until he closed the door and the lights came on inside, then I crawled to the door and knocked softly. There was no immediate response, only movement inside. I knocked again, harder. "Who's there?" a wary voice called from inside. "Pomagite Pazhalista," I replied in Russian, my voice hoarse from cold and exhaustion. "Help me, please." The door creaked open, and a rough face with a bushy beard appeared. The man's eyes darkened as he saw me, a pathetic, half-human creature trembling in the snow. "Christ, what the hell?" he exclaimed, but he didn't slam the door shut as I had feared. "Please," I said, switching to clearer Russian. "I had an accident, I need help." The man hesitated for a moment, his sharp blue eyes sweeping from my head down to my remaining torso, lingering on the discolored patches of skin, now shrunk to small spots but still visible. After a moment's consideration, he opened the door wider. "Come in, before you freeze to death." I crawled inside,